So, welcome everyone to this Sencode learning workshop titled Home Workers and Cybersecurity for Home Workers, should I say. My name is Matthew Prothero-Hill. I'm one of the founders of Sencode Cybersecurity alongside Callum Duncan, who's also with us today. And I just want to start, first of all, just by thanking our organisers, Steve and Kane at Gateway UK, for the fantastic work they've done in organising this event for us. So, just to give you a bit of background about Sencode, we're a Northeast-based SME offering cyber awareness training and penetration testing services to businesses of all sizes, really, to help them improve their resilience to the ever-increasing threat of cyber attacks. And those of you who are not familiar with the term penetration testing, it's not quite as dangerous as it sounds, and it mostly involves conducting simulated cyber attacks against an agreed and authorized target, usually the digital infrastructure of a client's business. And we do this to highlight any vulnerabilities to the target system on network, any vulnerabilities that they have. And we then produce a comprehensive report, including our findings and any advice that we might have for our clients so they can ultimately mitigate the risks to their business and really bolster their security posture. So I think the biggest challenge we face today as cybersecurity professionals is raising an effective level of awareness of the growing dangers of cybercrime in other businesses. And we think that in order to really be effective, the awareness and level of cyber alertness, if you like, really needs to become a part of a business's policies and really be at the heart of the way that they operate digitally. And certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, we have identified the importance of cyber awareness really simply by hearing time and again that a lot of companies out there are having security audits the sole purpose of meeting compliance requirements of the industry that they're in. And maybe after 6 months or a year later, they're retested, only for the pen tester to find out that absolutely nothing has been done to reduce the actual risks found on the previous test. And this is the reason that at Sencode, we really believe in promoting a culture of security beyond compliance. So now that we've all seen the COVID-19 pandemic has really given rise to professionals having to make a huge amount of adjustments in the way that they operate. And this has often included the location from which professionals are required to work. And the purpose of this workshop is really to give you a good understanding of the best security practices while working from home, including our top 10 cybersecurity tips for keeping your home network locked down while you're in lockdown and working from home. We'll also take a look at virtual private networks or VPNs, which are a great way to extend your work network securely. And we'll cover hard drive encryption as well and why that's a good idea. And we'll also go over the best practices for hosting and attending virtual online meetings with software like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, which of course have now become the new normal. Then we will look at some physical security and do some housekeeping physical wise before finishing off with the attacker's perspective. And at that point, I'll hand you over to Callum for his thought-provoking website hacking demo. So let's get started with the Sencode top 10 tips for working securely from home. Number one, don't share your PC. Wherever possible, it's a sensible idea to keep your work and your personal home devices separate. Try and avoid sharing the laptop that you use for work with the kids or even your partner, as mistakes do happen. And work could be lost, or that email that you're in the middle of might just get sent prematurely. Other user accounts could be compromised and increase your device's attack surface, or it could just simply be the use of vulnerable apps or software that could compromise your security. An additional option might be to isolate a part of your home network and use it purely for work as an added layer of security. Next up, we've got keep it digital. So we've all heard of the stories of fraudsters rummaging through bins, looking for documents that contain sensitive information and piecing them together to steal our identities. And dumpster diving, as it's known, is a real thing. And there are accounts of criminals who get really good at this activity, and even reports them earning over 100 grand in some cases. So it's no joke. Keep your information digital and avoid printing if at all possible. If you do have to print documents, always make sure that you shred any that you don't need, and never bin them intact to be pilfered. And number 3 on the list, fraudsters or social engineers are really good actors, and they love nothing more than to call their marks or targets under the guise of someone from the IT department. So if you get an unusual phone call and you don't know the caller 100%, just double check that their story or their request is a legitimate one with your line manager or your boss, to avoid being tricked, posing information that an attacker can use. Number 4, patch your computer. So keeping your software up to date is crucial in ensuring that new exploits and vulnerabilities found are patched and protected against. So for most people, having automatic updates switched on is the best option. And there are additional features in many antivirus packages that will alert you to outdated applications as well. Moving on to 5, phishing. Most people now have heard of phishing. If you haven't, it's where someone will send an email with contents which is designed to basically open something or have a action that you don't want, to basically get your information. And it's now rife. Attack numbers have surged in 2020 as more people have been forced to work remotely. And half of all cyber attacks in the UK are estimated to be through phishing attempts, which is about 20% above the global average at the time this content was made. So, and there's no sign of it slowing down either. So it's a really good idea to regularly check to see if your email address has been compromised in a data breach. And you can actually do that now on our own website, sencode.breaches.co.uk. And never click on a link or open attachment unless you're 100% certain that it's legitimate. Simply contact the centre to confirm that it's authentic. Falling for phishing attacks can really mean valuable information theft, loss of system control, or it could even mean activating some nasty ransomware that could encrypt your entire network and hold it to ransom. And this is what happened to Redcar Council about this time last year, and it cost them approximately £10.14 million. So huge impact there, and that was mainly because there was no backup. So number 6, we have be wary of SMSs. Just like phishing, smishing is another form of phishing, or SMS phishing if you like. And as the name suggests, it's an attack via a text message. And it's attempting to lure you into clicking on malicious links. Again, check the source by contacting them and confirming the legitimacy of the message. Number 7, be careful with public Wi-Fi. It's really recommended that you avoid using public Wi-Fi altogether. It's impossible to know who controls the access point, and it can leave you wide open to anyone snooping on the network, potentially exposing your work sensitive and confidential data through like man-in-the-middle attacks. Number 8, so protect your home Wi-Fi. Now, there are a number of things you can do to secure your network. Probably, firstly, the thing to do is check that your router is secure. So the access to your wireless network must be guarded by a strong password. If you get a new internet provider, they often come with a password that you should change. It's also possible to isolate parts of your home network as well for work. You could create a subnet, for example, in the network settings, just to make sure that it's extra secure, as I mentioned earlier. Number 9, this is a big one. Changing your passwords regularly is one of the best ways that you can keep your digital life secure. It's really important that you make sure you never use the same password twice for different sites. If one gets hacked, then all the others are compromised. So we recommend using a password manager, and that's able to generate and remember strong and complex passwords for you. And all you really need to do to access them is remember one memorable passphrase, not password. Make up a phrase, because length equals security when it comes to passwords, and that will access them all for you. And finally, in the top 10, number 10 is lock your computer. Now, we all need to get up and have a stretch, grab a drink, have a comfort break now and then, but it's really good practice to be in the habit of locking your computer when you do so. And that way you've got the peace of mind that you're the only person with access to your machine, and there can be no intruders in your absence or error. Okay, so that's it for the top 10 for working safely from home. Next, I'll just touch on VPNs. So one of the best ways to ensure privacy online is by setting up a virtual private network, or VPN. And this technology extends your private network across a public one, and enables each end user to send and receive data across shared or public networks as if they were connected directly. And the best way to think of a VPN is a bit like a tunnel across the network that is going to leave you impervious to interference from other outside users on the network. And VPNs often use encryption and are a great way to protect sensitive data on the work network when you're working in. It's important to do a little bit of research into VPN providers, as you need to make sure that you trust them to keep your data secure. There are some free options out there, but it's advisable to go with a provider with the best reputation. So do a bit of research, have a Google. VPNs are now becoming more widely used as well in some browsers. So Opera, for example, has a VPN built into it, and we'll probably see more of that going forward. So moving on, hard drive encryption. So for a lot of people, encrypting their entire hard drive might seem like a bit of an extreme measure, and quite complicated as well, and probably more trouble than it's worth. But the process is actually not a difficult one, and the pros for doing this do outweigh the cons. And in fact, there's more and more storage devices, particularly SSDs now, that are coming with built-in encryption. And these days, they're often self-encrypted. Again, with a little bit of Googling, it's easy to find out the best option for your system, and it can often be done through Windows operating system as well, with an unnoticeable impact on the performance of your machine. And doing this, of course, will mean that any intruders will not be able to access anything on your storage drive without the decryption key. This one's a common sense one: physical security. It does matter, and it simply requires a little bit of thought and common sense. We're human beings, we're all human, we all make mistakes, but do try and avoid them when securing your car or your home. If you leave your keys in the door of your house or in your car with your laptop sat in the front seat, then you're asking for trouble. And believe me, it does happen quite a bit. So one of the most noticeable things that the pandemic has brought is the way in which we have meetings. And that's probably the most dramatic change that we've all had to get used to. But in spite of this, we've not really had any security training on how to do it. We've just got on with it and learned how to do it ourselves. So we've all had to get used to communicating using online virtual meeting software like Teams or Zoom, just to give a couple of examples. And a few of us have had no training at all. So I've put together a few best practices that you should bear in mind when participating in your online meeting. So I'd start with, don't share links. You don't always know if they are safe, and they could affect everyone in the meeting. They could also be disguised as something that they're not. Using consumer grade software can also leave you open to exploitation. Don't make sure that participants can't share your screen by default. Again, anything could pop up there. You want to keep that secure. If you don't need to use your video, then don't. It does take up bandwidth and it can ruin the call quality. But of course, this can be dependent on what kind of call you're having. A lot of training instructors do insist on you being visible at all times. So just use your discretion on that one. But it does take up bandwidth, so if you can get away with it, try not to use your video. Also, don't record calls unless you need to, and it's worth bearing in mind, remembering that you need permission from all participants if you do. Otherwise, you can potentially run into trouble with data protection. Make sure meetings are locked and eject participants when finishing. Leaving them connected can allow them to listen in after your meeting. And I'm sure we've all probably experienced this by now. When we're having breaks and things like that, we can still hear people talking. So it's important to remember that when we're having a breakout. Again, keep the software that you're using updated and ensure password protection is on at all time. And use the waiting room features as well. That's a great option for vetting your participants. Zoom particularly has a good breakout rooms option. And finally, educate others. Any other people that are meeting with you, other employees, make sure that they have the same level of awareness as yourself, because you can be as secure as you like, but if everybody else that's using the same tool isn't on your wavelength, it doesn't matter what you know. So that's that taken care of. So I'll just now hand you over to my esteemed colleague and business partner, Callum Duncan, and he will demonstrate how our website can be probed for vulnerabilities and exploited. Over to you, Callum.
How's it going? I'm just going to play a video of me hacking into a site. You should be able to see me here. I'll just set this up right now. I will turn my camera and my microphone off while this is going on, just to save you all from my reactions.
And now it's time for the demo. Firstly, I'd like to thank Gateway for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank you all for coming. So, what are we doing today? I'm going to have an environment set up with two machines. The one on the left will be a web server, and the one on the right will be the machine that I use to hack it. It's a Linux distribution called Kali, and it just has a lot of useful tools for hacking and penetration testing. So let's drop right in. First things first, like I just mentioned, the one on the left is the web server, and the one on the right is my box. And so we don't run into anything insanely illegal, we're going to make sure that none of these are hosted on the internet and that they're only hosted on my internal machine. So we're going to drop into my machine and we're going to see what we can't break. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is going to open a terminal. This terminal and this command will allow us to scan the web server that we set up to see if there's any services running on there, to see if there's any versions that might be vulnerable. Obviously, we know that it is vulnerable because we set it up and it's set up to be vulnerable. On port 22, there's SSH. On port 80, HTTP. And on port 111 and 2049 are some storage devices. So what we're going to do, we're going to open up a browser and we're going to go to the target website. As you saw on port 80, it's taken us straight to the site, and this is what's before you. Obviously, it looks like some form of furniture website with some news and some products. A lovely little table there. Just wandering around the site now, just getting our bearings. It looks like they've got a login portal, some sign up, and also a contact page. So we'll go back to the main page. We'll see what's floating around. You'll see that on the top left in the URL bar, it's using PHP. You can tell that by the .php extension, and that's just a framework that people use to make websites and for them to have functionality on the back end. So what we're going to do, we're going to press F12 to open up the developer options for the browser that we're using. And then we're going to just take a little look at the HTML. It looks like this site is using an older version of Bootstrap. I think we're on version 4 or 5 now, as well as jQuery. They obviously have a search function, which allows you to search your tables. And this is one of the things that we like to look at on websites to test whether anywhere that we can interact with a site is the place that we want to start trying to attack. You can see that they've got the table there in the HTML, and when that changes, you'll see the HTML code at the bottom change. Oh, so what we've just done, we've put in a character that it didn't like. It didn't seem to like the comment character, the quote, single quote. And that's usually a pretty good sign that they're not handling this data correctly. They're taking it and they're using it directly without cleaning it up, without making sure that it's safe for them to be putting into their database. And what's happening is we're getting an SQL error. So SQL is the database language that websites use to interact and query their database. What we're going to do to test this is we're going to open up a program called SQL Map. This is a Kali program, and I think you can also get it on Windows. And what SQL Map will do, it will look through the website, it will look around anywhere that it can input data, and it will check to see if it's vulnerable to an attack called SQL injection. And then it will, if it is, it will save the contents of the database to one of our folders. It's just going through some cookies and detecting what kind of database it is. You can see the database management system is MySQL. Do you want to check the other ones? Of course, no, because we know what it is. And then it's going to start running its commands and testing its commands to essentially footprint and do a bit of reconnaissance on where the database is, what they look like, how many there is. And you see, oh, it's got a vulnerable parameter there, the filter parameter. You see in the top bar, which is the one that we checked. You press yes to start SQL injecting, and this will pull out essentially all the contents of all the databases that are there to see if there's any usernames or passwords or anything useful in there. Also, this in itself is quite a high level vulnerability. It looks like it's found some passwords there. So what it's going to use is it's going to try and crack these passwords. As they're usually stored, they're stored in what's called a hash, so that you don't store the password directly. And then to crack these hashes, what you do is you use the same method that they use to hash it, and you repeatedly try and find out if you can get one that matches what the password is that was hashed in their database. So we just move over to where it has outputted the files and where it's outputted the database. You can see target.site there. And if you look in the dump file, in the dump folder, just clear my screen. You see what is the database name, so CSECVM. That's obviously just the name of either the database user or the database that they've got. And you see these are the databases that we've pulled out. So you've got basket, orders, products, token, or users. Obviously the most important one there is users. And you can see that it has quite easily just pulled out the usernames, the email addresses, the passwords of all these people, as well as something called a dealer and killed by and killed on, which we're not entirely sure about. And you see, oh, you know, there's two accounts at the bottom. There's also quite a few historical musicians there, and you'll see what I mean by the hashes. They begin with a wildcard or a star, and then in brackets is what they actually are in real life. So we're going to take the bottom one and we're going to try and log in with it just to check to see if that is a valid account or if there's any extra steps that need to be done. We took the password from the password column and we took the username from the username column. As you can see, when we logged in, we got a change in the bottom left of the storage, which not only did it change the site, you can see at the bottom left here, it's also added what's called a cookie to ours. And the same way that we tried to decrypt the passwords, what we're also going to try and do is decrypt this cookie, see what's in that cookie, see what they might be using it for, and see how it might be useful to us. So it looks like it's a cookie that's an MD5 hash of just the word dealer, and that's the name of the cookie. And when you refer back to the database, you can see that it has an is dealer column, and 0 or 1 must decide on whether they are a dealer or not. They're obviously a dealer of furniture. You can see on the 2 to the left, there's 0 there, whereas you look at Mozart and he has a 1 there, so Mozart is obviously a dealer of some sorts. So what we're going to try and do, because we know sort of how the structure in this, we're going to try and just change ours to be 1. Didn't look like it did much. It didn't do anything there. So maybe we have to make it an MD5 hash. Maybe it has to be in the same format that they had to ensure that when we're using it, it matches their process in the back end. So we're going to go to one of these sites, which will easily create an MD5 hash for us. And what we're going to put in there is just 1. As we saw in the database, Mozart had 1 there. So there should be no real stopping us if we just put in 1 there. And we change that and we refresh the site. Oh, what's this? So it looks like the furniture site was a front, or either they've been hacked for something a little bit more nefarious, something called the Cotton Highway. Some form of drug dealing site. As you can see, there's a number of drugs there. Website hacking, DDoSing, My Little Pony. And it looks like the filter is vulnerable to the same parameter there. If we look around, just now that we're logged in, looking around, seeing what other accounts are there, can we go change my account settings? There's also an admin option there, which is strange. And so this obviously looks to be some form of image upload or file upload functionality that they have, just allowing you to browse through the site and seeing what uploads are there. And as you can see, it seems to match what's actually from those images when we follow the location of one of those images. Matches up perfectly with that one. So we'll go to another one, see if they all match up. And yeah, it looks like there's just a number of images on there that are have been uploaded to the site, and that's what it views and that's what it shows you in that panel. And what this is probably doing is just running a command called an ls command, which will just list all the files in a directory. And when we put in the semicolon character, you'll see the ls, and it also lists the files in the directory again. So this shows us that it is vulnerable to something called command injection. And what command injection is or does, it allows a user to directly input commands from a website into the backend server. So you're not interacting with the website anymore. You're now interacting with the server. So what we're going to try and do, we're going to find something called a reverse shell. And what a reverse shell does is you would run this code on someone else's server, and they will come back and contact you with what looks like a terminal directly from their website or from their web server. So we just tell it, oh yeah, contact us at this address, essentially, as well as this port number. So you can think of it like an apartment. We're at this apartment at this address. So we just put in 9001 there. We've got the command in. Make sure we've got that semicolon at the start, which is breaking up the command that they were previously running and running a new command. That's one of the usual ways that you go through and you would try to run a command. And then we run nc.lvnp on 9000. So that's just setting up a listener, something that will wait there and will listen for a connection back from this server. So when I tried to run the command then, it looked like it didn't really work. So we'll check over it, just make sure that everything should be working, and it doesn't look like it will. So what we will do, we will try a different method. We got no connection back to our server, so we'll try a different method. What we'll do, we'll get a PHP command. So we saw that it was running PHP earlier. So we will create a file, a PHP file, on our server. You can see that there isn't any connections there, there's just listening. We'll create this PHP command and we will run it on their server, and that should get us a reverse shell back to our server. So we take this PHP reverse shell from an online repository, and then what we're going to do, we're going to make a file for it on our server so that we can download it onto the web server, and then that should allow us to run that file and get that connection back to us, allowing us to take essentially complete control over the machine. We just fill in the file with our information, we make sure that we've not missed anything. Again, just add in our address and our port number. So that's our internal address because we're only on the same network. Put this in here. And then we'll add our port number. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start a HTTP server up where we left that file. And what a HTTP server will do, will allow it to contact us and just download the file directly from us. So we don't have to worry too much about transferring a file. We can use the command injection that we found earlier to download this file from our server using our address and the port number of the file where it's stored, as well as the actual file itself. So we download that, and then what we should be able to see when we go to the semicolon here, if we run an ls command just to list what's in that directory, we should be able to see the shell.php there. So now that we've got our shell on that server, we can essentially, we're going to try and run it. We're going to try and run that shell, so when we go to it in the web browser, it should run that shell and it should contact straight back to us. Again, when we went to the image uploads file, it doesn't look like it's there. It looks like it's in a different location. It's where index.php is and list.php. So it hasn't uploaded it to where we thought it might have uploaded it. So we're going to move it to a place that we know where it will be. We're going to move it to the website's home directory so that we can just do target site /shell.php, and it should just run and give us a reverse shell straight back to our server. You see that it's no longer where it was originally, and if we list the files within the home directory of the server, you should see shell.php there. So that tells us that we can go and just put in shell.php here, and it's hung. It's frozen. The website's not loading, which is exactly what we want it to do. We see that it's downloaded the shell file previously, and because it's hung, it means there's a connection. And what you can see here is our connection to that server. We've got a shell like we were using on ours directly to the other server, and you can see on there when I run the whoami command, I'm the website of www data, and that means that we have essentially got complete control of this website and this server.
There we go. So that was the demo of how a hacker would generally try and hack someone's site or drop someone's database so that they can see their content. What I'll do now, I'll hand you back over to Matt, and then we'll probably just go to questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Callan. It's a great demo there. I think the main thing to take away from the demo, I mean, for a lot of people, the technical side of things does go over people's heads, but the main thing to remember is that a lot of websites are created with vulnerabilities for two reasons. First of all, developers don't necessarily create sites with security in mind, and it's usually not a requirement from their client. And also, new vulnerabilities are discovered all the time. So it's really important that if you have a website, you need to assess its security or get a professional to come and have a look at it for you. So just to summarize what we've gone through today, I'll just present my screen again. Hopefully that's come through. So just to go over what we've done, when working remotely or from home, you really need to make sure that you're not sharing your work computer, you're not creating a paper trail of sensitive information, and you're making sure that you're shredding effectively as well. You need to make sure that you verify all your calls, keep your hardware and software updated. Again, for most people, automatic updates should do that for you. Just make sure that the option is picked. Be vigilant when opening emails and text messages. Beware of phishing attacks, of course. Avoid working on public Wi-Fi and secure your home network for work wherever possible. One of the biggest ones, change your passwords and use a password manager if you can. For some people, again, it can be a bit of a hassle to get it set up for the first time, but once it's done, and it makes life an awful lot easier, and you have that peace of mind that everything is secure. Make sure that any unattended devices are locked, of course. So particularly when you're working from home, you've got the family buzzing around you, and if there's many devices in your homes as there are in mine, people don't mind just switching from one device to another. So make sure that you are keeping that separate. Make sure that you encrypt your hard drives if possible and connect to your work via a VPN. Make sure you and other employees understand the best practices for virtual meetings online, and ensure that your working environment is physically secure. So that brings us to the end of the talk. Hope you found some value in it, and perhaps a little bit more cyber aware of what you need to do and things that you need to be aware of when you're working from home. Because it's important to remember as well that when you are working from home, particularly if you work for an organization where you go to an office, it's quite a large office, that office will have been set up and that business has been set up to ensure that there's a certain level of security at that place. But by having to work from home, that security is decentralized, and the security is only as good as the individual at home. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll welcome any questions that you have at this point.